What's up, Rivalers, and welcome to the official updated Season 0 tier list. Now, 3 weeks ago, I put out a tier list when the game was very new to help players get a general idea of what is strong and weak in the game. But since then, a lot has changed. Players have figured out and optimized the heroes a lot more, new tech has been invented, the meta has shifted considerably, and I have climbed completely solo queue to Grandmaster rank, learning a ton along the way. The game has honestly evolved a lot since our last tier list. Some heroes that people thought were bad were actually really strong, and vice versa. Now, just like with the last tier list, I truly believe you should play whoever your favorite heroes are. This tier list is going to be for those who want to optimize and min-max their ranked climb and want to understand the game better. So without further ado, let's get into the tier list. Now, one thing that hasn't changed is my placement for Black Widow. She is still in D tier. This character is just insanely difficult to make work and with so little payoff. She's a sniper character whose headshots are extremely hard to land and they can't even one-shot a single hero in the game. It almost feels like throwing to lock this character. I really expect Widow to get a buff moving into Season 1, but as for now, she is truly just terrible and you should stay far away from her if all you care about is winning. And honestly, she's the only character like that in the game. Every other hero truly feels like they have pros and cons and a certain place in the meta, whether it be as a counter pick or a niche pick. Widow is our only hero in D tier, so moving on up the tier list, we have Storm and Scarlet Witch. Now, C tier heroes are definitely outclassed in pretty much every aspect. There's no real competitive reason to play these characters at the moment unless you really enjoy them. Storm is slow. Her passive auras really aren't noticeable. She's difficult to aim with and get picks, and really the only redeeming part about her is her ultimate, which does grant you access to the enemy backline so you can usually wipe out the enemy healers. And that's more than I could say about Scarlet Witch, who is incredibly easy to pick up and play. She's a great character for new players, but her damage output just cannot match the pick potential of any of the higher tiered DPS. Her ultimate is slow and predictable, and especially now that the game's been out for a while, people know to focus it, so it rarely ends up getting more than 1 KO, and its lengthy cast time usually makes you an easy pick yourself. She's not great at melting tanks, she's not great at creating picks, she's overall pretty short-ranged and just not very good right now. Honestly, the most attractive aspect about Scarlet Witch is the fact that she enables the sword team-up ability for Magneto, who is already a very good tank. You'll see him much further up the tier list. Now, joining these young ladies in C tier is going to be Captain America. As a tank, his defensive properties just aren't up to par. It kind of feels like you're wasting a tank slot on your team when you lock Cap, because he's not the best at creating space or having a big impactful ultimate. Really, how you should think about Captain America is he's a disruptor. He runs in and out of the enemy team just trying to pull focus, getting in a few punches, but you're rarely going to see Cap actually be able to damage through enemy healing and pick up a ton of KOs. So yeah, he kind of just runs around. He's a threat to be aware of, but choosing him really does kind of leave your team without a real tank. A tank that can move with the team and create space and charge up a big, meaningful ultimate that can crack a team fight wide open. And that is going to round out our C tier. Next up, we're moving into B tier, where you'll find heroes that are definitely playable in a competitive setting, but they just take a lot more effort, a lot more skill with the heroes, or they need to be picked into specific comps to really shine. And a perfect example of that is Venom. Venom is a dive tank who is very easy to focus since he doesn't have any defensive abilities like Hulk or Magneto. He really just does have a big ol' health bar. So Venom works great if you're building a dive team comp that can just jump into the enemy super fast and overwhelm them all together, but he's really not great at peeling or creating space or even diving alone. His lengthy cooldowns means that once you're in the enemy team, if things go badly, you might just get KO'd, whereas someone like the Hulk can jump in, soak some damage, get his damage off, and then almost instantly jump back out. Playing Venom takes a lot more commitment to the dive, and you can skirt around some of these long cooldown weaknesses by watching our Venom guide and learning about spell discipline, but he's honestly just outclassed most of the time. He's got good damage for a tank, but not enough to make up for the fact that you're kind of a liability when you play this hero. And I feel the same way about Thor. When paired up with Captain America, he gives him a nice team up, bringing a little bit more damage to their double dive tank comp, but it's just not really enough to make up for the fact that Thor is a stat stick dive tank. He's an offensive threat, but doesn't really bring anything defensive to the table to actually protect his team. If he can find his way onto the enemy healers, yeah, he might be able to take one out, and his ultimate is nice to win duels with, but its slow and lumbering windup animation means that at best you're going to be getting the enemy healers to pull out their ultimates, rather than actually taking anyone down with you. Next up in B tier, we are going to find SpiderMan and Iron Fist. Now, I know a lot of lower ranked lobbies get kind of terrorized by Iron Fist, but in the grand scheme, the meta in ranked right now really does revolve around insanely high healing and high ranged burst. And Iron Fist can KO isolated targets he finds, but his damage does not come out fast enough to really find that first pick to create a numbers advantage. and he's just such a risky character to play despite his mobility, because you still have to jump into the enemy to get any value at all. And as we move further up the tier list, you'll see that meta really is dominated by risk-free ranged characters that can just sit back and snipe until they get a lucky headshot or pick, which then allows their team to steamroll a numbers advantage fight. So many times Iron Fist jumps in thinking he can burst someone, maybe he even gets them down to 1/4 health, but then come the savior healers and all of that damage disappears in an instant, and Iron Fist is kind of stuck overextended. SpiderMan is a character that has a lot more burst than Iron Fist and more mobility, so he is slightly higher up the tier list because his potential to find that one pick is honestly quite high, especially if you're a skilled Spider-Man player. He almost feels like a character that is worthless unless you're a one-trick, and even then there's just so many more consistent and safe picks to lock in right now. Up next in B tier is Penny Parker, a very defensive-oriented character, but over these last 3 weeks, I think Penny has really found her place in the game. People understand where to hide the spider nest so they're not just instantly destroyed now. People are getting a lot better at utilizing her right-click web shop to interrupt enemy ults, and that thing is on a 3-second cooldown, which is just insane. She has so much disruption potential, and in general, Penny is really good on defense and pretty good on offense depending on the map, but she's just not one of those always useful heroes like Doctor Strange, but she is very good when slotted into team comps and maps appropriately. We also have Moonight in B tier. Now, I almost placed Moonight in A tier because of his easy and reliable damage. He is especially great at shredding through clumped up teams, but he really does struggle against shield tanks, which are completely dominating the tank meta at the moment. His onks don't pass through shields, and his primary and secondary fire don't bounce off them, so if they have a Doctor Strange or Magneto, you really aren't going to be bringing too much to the table. And while his ultimate does do good damage, it comes out in these chunks rather than in one big burst, which is kind of what's needed to break through the absurdly high healing in the game. As we move further up the tier list, you'll see the absolute top tier picks are all about overwhelming the healers with high pick burst potential. You want to one-shot someone before Mantis or Luna have a chance to heal them back up, and it's got to happen fast because again, the healing in this game is wildly overtuned. But yeah, Moon Knight is good at putting some chip damage on a lot of people. He's not always great at putting a ton of damage all at once on one person. You can do it if you find a pick on a high priority target and get a nice onk placement followed up by both your left and right clicks, but usually you're just going to be firing into clumped up enemy teams, and if their healers are doing their job, you might just not find any KOs. Joining B tier is Jeff the Landshark. Now, this is a character that gets much higher value in lower ranks. He's honestly rarely played in higher elo, but I would say he's a very viable pick all the way up until like high platinum. His heals are great, his survivability is pretty good, his ultimate has terrorized and created so many Twitter clips, but he is overall the weakest strategist in the game, which is honestly saying something because he's still B tier. Strategist is the best and most important class in the game right now, so let's get that out of the way. This role has unbelievably high agency, so even the worst hero in the role is still B tier. Next up in B tier, we have Magic. I am still just not super impressed by this character. Every now and then I'll see a Magic that really takes over the game, but it's just inconsistent, and the character is just too risky. I mean, that's part of playing a melee character. There's always going to be that risk versus reward, and it just doesn't seem worth it to lock this character unless you are a Magic one trick. And rounding out B tier is going to be Squirrel Girl, a completely brain off character that just likes to spam shots down main hallways and choke points. She's so fun to play, but unfortunately just not really anything special. She has no real dive potential, so you're really just playing her far back and essentially sniping without the actual accuracy of a sniper. You just spam shots hoping a few of them land and take someone out, but at that point there's just significantly better heroes to play further up the list. Now moving into the A tier, these characters are very good. They may not be the absolute best in slot, but they bring at least one or two unique attributes that make them very worth picking up. For instance, Rocket Raccoon is the second lowest ranked strategist in the game, but that does not mean he's bad by any means. He's got very consistent healing, lots of good offensive utility when paired with characters like the Punisher and Bucky, since you give them both infinite ammo. And then his revive beacon is great in a lot of scenarios. For instance, if you're playing Convoy and your team didn't push the cart very far, and now it's your turn to defend, I think Rocket is a great pick here because usually the team that gets that very first pick is going to just steamroll over the enemy team in a 5v6 scenario. And the long walk back from base is essentially going to mean your team will lose 5v6. So that revive beacon is almost like a safety net that can save the entire game, giving your team a do-over. Now, can his healing output match any of the top tier healers in a pinch? No. But as you move up the ladder and get into Diamond tier, the game allows up to 4 characters to be banned, and in most games, Luna Snow and Mantis are banned every game, which makes Rocket a great character to pick up when they're both banned. And Rocket's biggest strength is he just never gets KO'd. His mobility lets him survive longer than pretty much any other healer in the game. And now let's talk about the biggest difference between our tier list at the game's launch window and today's tier list. And that is Wolverine. Oh my gosh, this character has gone from one of the worst heroes in the game to almost one of the best in specific scenarios. Logan really is the best character at taking out tanks, and it took players some time to kind of learn his identity. As we saw for the longest time, Wolverine was basically a troll pick because people were kind of trying to play him as more of a standard duelist, but his entire purpose is to use his dashes to position behind tanks and then throw those enemy tanks off the map or out of position into your team. It's called the kidnapping tech, and it has completely changed how Wolverine plays in Marvel Rivals. So yeah, along with absolutely everyone else, I would like to admit that I was wrong about Wolverine. This character is single-handedly keeping triple tank from becoming meta. He is seriously that good at shredding tanks. He's got percent health on his damage output, which means the more HP a hero has, the better Logan is going to be at dealing with them. So yeah, we took Wolverine from D tier all the way to the top of A tier. What a glow up. Joining A tier is Iron Man, with a massive asterisk because this character has really found his place in the meta because his ultimate is one of the only reliable ways to break through Luna Snow and Mantis's insane healing ultimates. Iron Man is a very good DPS, especially in Diamond Plus where Hawkeye and Hela are always banned. He has really become the premier consistent DPS character as long as those snipers are not in the game to pick him out of the sky. His team up with Hulk gives him extra damage, making his pick potential even higher, so yeah, Hulk is also joining Iron Man in A tier. Now he's not as consistent or as useful as tanks like Doctor Strange or Magneto, who you will see higher up the list, but his ability to disrupt the enemy team and protect his own with his bubble shield is really good. I honestly think Hulk is one of those characters that people needed to learn his playstyle, but now that we're a few weeks into the game, I'm seeing a lot of much scarier Hulk players than before. Some more characters that I bumped from B tier into A tier are going to be StarLord and Winter Soldier. Now, once again, these characters' values lie in how reliable they are at taking out those high priority targets, creating picks. And both of their ultimates are nearly always going to be guaranteed picks. StarLord's ult turns on auto aim, which means you can just find the Mantis and Luna and boom, you've won the fight. You do need to be a little aware of there being a Magneto on the enemy team though, because if Magneto pops his ult in response to StarLord's ult, you're not going to be able to freely fire. Mag's ult will just absorb all of your shots. But yeah, we've all been terrorized by hearing Bucky shout, "Again! Again! Again!" 30 times in a row. I definitely underestimated how consistently good this hero was at creating picks. His hookshot is very strong. Now next up is Punisher and Neymar, two characters that are very strong in every game, but really shine in terms of picking them as counter picks. If you need a hit scan character and you're playing in Diamond Plus lobbies where Hela and Hawkeye are banned, Punisher is your guy. No doubt about it, he is the second best hit scan behind Hela for sure. So if the enemy team is locking in Iron Man and you need someone to gun him out of the sky, Punisher is really good. He's very easy to play, he's got a great reliable rate of fire to just always be putting out damage, and his ultimate can definitely tear through entire teams. As for Neymar, I think he's really great in general now that people have had some time to understand his playstyle, but he really shines when the enemy team is locking in those super fast, hyper mobile dive assassins, things like Psylock, things like Black Panther, because Neymar's turrets automatically lock on and fire, which means you don't need to spend precious seconds lining up shots. The turrets really will take care of those heroes for you. And his ultimate ended up being one of the scariest in the game actually, since it disables mobility options while the whale is falling on you. More players have gotten a lot more clever about turret placement as well. In the early days of the game, people were just kind of spamming them down in front of themselves, but now I see a lot more clever usage. Things like putting the turrets up high or in the corners of the map, it really made a difference in how effective this character was. So yes, Neymar was definitely a character that I and many others totally let go under the radar. And I just want to take a second to talk about how cool it has been to watch this game's meta develop in real time. Even in this short period of time since launch, so much of this game's DNA and meta has changed in just a few weeks. And with the upcoming edition of the Fantastic Four and balance changes in Season 1, I can't wait to see the game change even more. It has been an absolute pleasure playing this game, learning the game to a high level every single day. I'm seeing people figure out something new, which totally changes how the games play out. I am absolutely in love with this game, and I can't wait to see how the game develops even further. And remember, in Season 1, all of our current heroes' seasonal bonuses are going to disappear, and we're going to get brand new ones. So for instance, Hela right now has a 20% damage boost every single game, which has made her the best DPS in the game. But in Season 1, we're going to have to adapt to Hela dealing 20% less damage and see how that affects affects the meta. So yeah, stay tuned. This game is going to be always evolving, always changing. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can keep your finger on the pulse of the meta, because I will be making regular tier list videos just like this one to let you know who is good and who is bad. Now moving on to Adam Warlock, this character does the most damage out of any healer and has an absolutely game-changing ultimate, which is a team-wide res. This can be really useful in the final seconds of overtime to give your team essentially a huge do-over, and the enemy team probably popped ults to wipe your team to begin with, so it's just a massive advantage to be able to fight one last time again. He also has the ability to split enemy damage among your team's health bars, which lets you survive a lot of huge DPS ults. He's honestly just a very solid pick, especially once again when you get into Diamond Plus, and Mantis and Luna are just banned every game. Now as for the tank in A tier, that is going to be our boy Groot. Groot players are honestly just frightening. This character is not only really good at creating space on push maps when on offense, he is amazing at breaking line of sight between you and your healers. I see so many people try and challenge Groot and they're just instantly separated from their team with good wall placement. His health bar is huge, his damage output is huge, and of course his ultimate sets up like 7 different DPS ults for a nice team wipe. You should really think about his ultimate as step 1 in a combo, using it to scoop the entire enemy team into one place for your team's Iron Man ult or Neymar ult, anything like that, and it's probably going to be a team wipe. Now moving on to the A tier, we have Psylock. Now I previously had Psylock in S tier, and I do believe that she has potential to be an S tier character again. She's actually one of my mains, and her invisibility and mobility and burst potential are all absolutely top class. But her ultimate really has a hard time finding KOs against coordinated teams or even just healers that are awake. A lot of the time when I play Psylock, I'm kind of relegated to being the guy that baits out the survivability tools. So you go in and you pop ult to hopefully pull out Luna ult, Mantis ult, Cloak and Dagger ult, Loki lamps, things like that. But it definitely does progressively get harder to make this character work the higher up the ladder you go. She is incredibly fun and definitely can take over games, but if nobody else on the team is presenting a threat to pull out these survivability tools, you're gonna have a hard time getting anything done. So I kind of consider Psylock an A tier hero with S tier potential if you're not the only threat on the team. Now moving on to the S tier characters. These heroes are the absolute best of the best. You should play them to climb, or at least learn them to know how to play with and against them, because they are very strong in the current meta. As for tanks, we've talked about them a little bit so far, but yeah, it's Magneto and Doctor Strange. Incredible utility through having their shield up. They let you move the payload, they let you take space, they can hold their own in a fight, and they both have really strong ultimates. I see people clowning on and sleeping on Magneto ult, but that just says to me that they don't understand the power of having a counter ult. His ultimate literally counters offensive ults like Iron Man, StarLord. You just can't use those ults if there's a Magneto on the team. There's not much else that needs to be said about these characters. I'm sure you've seen a ton of them in your games. They are just undoubtedly the best tanks. Now on to another character that is significantly higher since our last tier list video, and that is Black Panther. I don't know what they're feeding these Panther players, but it is downright impossible to track a good BP. It is just not possible. He will dash through you 3 times before you're even able to tell your team that you're getting dove. It turns out that they just needed a few weeks to really get the hang of their hero, because now he is the scariest diver in the game. Outside of having a bit of a lackluster ultimate, his base kit just downright makes him the best assassin and melee character in the game for sure. Now up next we have Cloak and Dagger, another hero that is still going under the radar for just how powerful their kit is. Their shroud ability lets them protect their entire team from otherwise team wiping ultimates. They've got great consistent heals and an ultimate that when used properly makes your team essentially immortal. I still see people that even in high elos aren't stacking the Cloak and Dagger ultimate. I think people are just not realizing that if you layer the ultimate over itself, the heals stack, giving your team a lot of seconds of just insane healing. Whenever Luna and Mantis is banned, you should 100% have a Cloak and Dagger on your team. And now moving on to the other S tier healer, it's actually my main, Loki. Loki has to be the most slept on hero in all of Marvel Rivals. This character has infinite potential. With proper clone and spell management, you should legitimately never get KO'd. Like ever. He has so many tools to survive dives with, especially his rune ability, but also the fact that he has infinite options for his ultimate. And then you can literally just pick and choose the correct ultimate for the occasion, and the ability to double up ultimates just creates some game-breaking possibilities. Now, Luna is the best strategist in the game, mostly because of her ultimate, right? So let's say you have a Luna and Loki on your team. Guess what? Now you have 2 of the best ultimate in the game. You can just copy Luna Snow's ult, and now your team has 12 seconds of what is basically immortality. It's crazy. Loki, in my opinion, has the best base kit of all the healers. So with Loki, you get the best base kit and the ability to have the best ultimate in the game, And when you Loki ult someone, you get a few seconds of their base kit too. It's unbelievable. I love this hero, and it's crazy to think that every time a new hero comes out, Loki is going to get even stronger because he'll have a new ultimate to use. And with that being said, that is going to conclude the S tier heroes. Now we're going to briefly touch upon the pick and ban tier heroes, which I think by now everyone probably knows. These 4 heroes have single-handedly shaped and warped the meta. Things that are strong in this game are at least in part strong because of how they stack up against, combine with, or burst through Luna Snow and Mantis ults. These 2 strategists are without a doubt the strongest healers in the game. You need to play them or ban them if you're in Diamond every single game. Their healing output is absurd, their ultimates are essentially immortality fields, they even have reliable hard CC to set up KOs with. There's just really not anything else to say, the characters are very, very OP. And yeah, of course, Hawkeye and Hela are the 100% best DPS in the game. Mostly because you can create a 100-0 pick out of thin air despite how much healing is in the game. Get a lucky headshot or 2, boom, you just won the fight. I'm really interested in seeing how the game develops moving into Season 1 because I imagine all 4 of these characters are going to receive massive nerfs on top of the fact that Hela and Hawkeye are also losing their seasonal bonuses. So there it is, Rivalers, my updated Season 0 tier list. Now that everyone has had some time to really learn the meta and their heroes, things have changed a lot. And if you have any questions about anything discussed here, feel free to put it down in the comments. I'm going to respond to every single question, so if you need anything clarified, definitely put your comment down below and let me know if you're excited about the official release of Season 1. It is just around the corner, guys, and I am certain we're going to have a whole new meta to play in. Really excited, and that is all for today, Rivalers. I'll see you in the next one.